14th July 2015. A calm Tuesday evening on the outskirts of Liverpool. Two teenagers on a motorbike turn onto a narrow street, unaware that what's about to happen will shake the city. Within hours, the man believed to be responsible vanishes from the country without a trace. 5 years later, across Norfolk, a quiet criminal network weaves through rural roads and hidden storage units. Then, one of its key members disappears overseas, leaving behind only coded aliases and encrypted usernames. By 2020, detectives in Cheshire begin piecing together another web. One laced with guns, cocaine, and cryptic messages sent through a system criminals believed was impossible to crack. 3 fugitives, 3 manhunts, from Liverpool to Spain, Bulgaria, and back to the UK. Each one convinced they could outrun justice or hide behind technology. But none of them were right. This is the story of the men who ran, the detectives who refused to stop, and the international operations that finally brought them home. Welcome to UK Crime Documentaries. Let's dive straight into the case. The crime event. It was just after 8:45 p.m., a warm Tuesday evening on Banks Road, Garston, a quiet stretch on Liverpool's southern edge. 2 teenagers rode a scrambler bike, weaving through the tight lanes between the estate and the river. The passenger was 18-year-old Vinnie Waddington, local, well-known, and by most accounts a familiar face in the area. Suddenly, a blue Audi A3 pulled out from a side street and sped toward them. Witnesses later recalled hearing the roar of the engine, followed by the violent crash, metal and plastic colliding as the motorbike was forced off the road. The Audi didn't stop. Its doors swung open and a 12-gauge shotgun blasted through the window. The pellets ripped through the air at close range. Vinnie was struck in the chest. His friend, Francis Humphreys, was also hit by fragments but managed to flee into a nearby garden, shouting for help. Neighbors rushed outside. Some recognized the distinctive Audi. Others tried desperately to keep the young man alive until paramedics arrived. But the injuries were devastating. Vinnie was pronounced dead shortly after reaching the hospital. What looked like a reckless drive-by soon appeared to be a targeted attack. Swift, deliberate, and brutally efficient. Within minutes, police sealed off the area. Forensic officers combed the scene, recovering shotgun cartridges, fragments of the damaged bike, and tire tracks showing exactly where the Audi had rammed it off the road. Detectives launched a door-to-door search, gathering witness accounts and CCTV footage from nearby homes. Just hours later, the blue Audi A3 was found abandoned on Hurst Street, less than a mile away. It was locked, the engine still warm. Inside, investigators discovered several personal items, including a Lucozade bottle, that would later become key evidence. Forensic analysis confirmed the fatal shot had been fired from the passenger side of the car. Ballistics linked it to a 12-gauge shotgun, still missing at the time. The Audi was registered to Luke Kendrick, who, along with Ryan Bate, became the first suspects arrested. DNA and fingerprints tied both men directly to the vehicle. Detectives quickly concluded the attack wasn't random. It was part of an ongoing feud between local groups in Garston and neighboring areas. Just a day before the shooting, there had been a confrontation involving David Unge and Vinnie's older brother. A clash police believe set off the deadly chain of events that followed. As detectives pieced together their case, they realized there was a third suspect still unaccounted for. Manhunt Begins. By dawn the next morning, one name kept appearing in intelligence reports and phone data: David Unge. To Merseyside police, he wasn't a stranger. He'd long been associated with Liverpool's criminal underworld and was already under quiet investigation for suspected heroin trafficking. But before officers could bring him in for questioning, Unge had vanished. CCTV from Dover Port, captured less than 24 hours after the shooting, showed him calmly arriving with a backpack and boarding a ferry to Calais. No panic, no rush, just a calculated escape. From that point, the trail went cold. For detectives, the timing was too precise to ignore. A young man murdered in a planned ambush, 2 suspects behind bars, and a third gone abroad within a day. This wasn't coincidence, it was preparation. Within days, an international arrest warrant was issued. Investigators believed Unge had traveled through France into Spain, a well-worn route for British criminals seeking refuge along the Costa del Sol, where cash economies and expat enclaves made it easy to blend in. Back in Liverpool, the case against Kendrick and Bate continued, leading to life sentences in 2016. Yet one name remained missing from the courtroom: David Ungi. He became the ghost of the Waddington case, mentioned in court, tied to the getaway car, but never seen. As years passed, intelligence files thickened with whispers, reports of Ungi running small drug operations in southern Spain, his contacts drifting between Marbella, Malaga, and Gibraltar. By 2020, the National Crime Agency placed him on its most wanted list, describing him as a dangerous fugitive wanted for murder and serious drug offenses. Merseyside police refused to let the case go cold, feeding every new lead into joint operations with the NCA's international unit. They checked everything: gyms, rented flats, storage units. Yet for almost 7 years, Ungi stayed invisible. A fugitive who seemed to have built a new life in the shadows, convinced he'd escaped the reach of British justice, international surveillance and arrest. Each year, bits of intelligence trickled in. Fleeting sightings in Spain, whispers from criminal contacts, even unverified tips about a British man working at a gym near Malaga. Most led nowhere, but investigators never took Ungi's name off their list. Then, in early 2022, a breakthrough. Spanish authorities traced a British national living under an alias in the town of Coen, a quiet community tucked behind the Costa del Sol, the last place anyone expected to find a wanted killer. Spanish National Police launched discreet surveillance, focusing on a local fitness center where a man resembling Ungi trained regularly. Keeping to himself, always paying in cash, the NCA was alerted. Working with Merseyside Police and the Northwest Regional Organized Crime Unit, NWROCU, they built a joint plan. Spanish officers would move first, with NCA agents on standby to confirm his identity once he was in custody. Everything had to be exact. Ungi was believed to be armed and had eluded capture for nearly a decade. On May 5th, 2022, just after 3 p.m., officers closed in. As Ungi stepped out of the gym, plainclothes police surrounded him and 3 companions. There was no time to run. The arrest was swift and controlled. Inside his rucksack, investigators found a 9mm Ruger pistol with its serial number removed, along with ammunition. The discovery confirmed his identity and strengthened the British case against him. Spanish police footage soon aired, showing Ungi in gym clothes, head lowered, flanked by armed officers. For detectives in Liverpool watching from afar, it marked the end of years of pursuit. The fugitive they chased across borders and time zones was finally caught. The NCA called it a significant arrest, part of a larger operation that same week, capturing several British fugitives hiding along the Iberian coast. For the investigators who had started the case years earlier, it proved one simple truth: distance, fake names, even time itself couldn't shield those wanted for murder. But bringing Ungi in was only the beginning. What followed would be another long battle: the fight to extradite him back to the UK. Extradition and legal process held under an international arrest warrant. Ungi awaited extradition, while the NCA began formal proceedings. A complex process requiring cooperation between UK prosecutors, the Home Office, and Spanish courts. He was placed in a high-security facility near Malaga, where hearings began in the summer of 2022. In court, Ungi appeared calm and reserved, speaking little. His defense team tried to delay extradition, claiming he had built a life in Spain and shouldn't be sent back. But by November 2022, the appeal was denied and the warrant upheld. He was flown back to Liverpool under police escort, landing at John Lennon Airport and taken straight into custody. Back in Merseyside, the murder investigation, once thought closed, reopened in full. Ungi was charged with the murder of Vinnie Waddington, attempted grievous bodily harm toward Francis Humphreys, and a firearms offense related to the weapon found during his arrest in Spain. When his trial began in spring 2023, it drew intense local attention, the final chapter in a case that had haunted the city for nearly 8 years. Prosecutors argued Ungi fled because he knew he was complicit in the killing, but the defense told a different story, that he fled out of fear, not guilt, claiming threats forced him to leave Liverpool for his own safety. He denied being in the Audi, denied knowing about the shotgun, and insisted he was a scapegoat based on rumor and old associations. Forensic experts presented the DNA evidence from the Lucozade bottle, but the defense countered that the car was used by multiple people, and the DNA alone couldn't prove he was there during the shooting. After 15 hours and 46 minutes of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict: not guilty of both murder and attempted grievous bodily harm. In May 2023, David Ungi walked free, acquitted of the charges that had defined nearly a decade of his life. But the story didn't end there. He remained under investigation for the firearms and drug offenses tied to his time in Spain. The fugitive had returned home, but with a record and a name forever linked to one of Liverpool's most haunting unsolved mysteries: loose ends and legacy. When the verdict was read in May 2023, declaring David Ungi not guilty of murder, the courtroom in Liverpool fell silent. For investigators, that silence wasn't closure. It was the uneasy pause between one battle ending and another beginning. Though acquitted, Ungi didn't walk away untouched. Spanish authorities still held convictions against him for firearms and drug offenses, tied to what was uncovered during his arrest in Cohen. The Liverpool case had begun back in 2015. By the time the trial concluded 8 years later, the outcome divided opinion, yet it also revealed a deeper truth about modern law enforcement. Ungi's story became a case study for both the National Crime Agency and Merseyside Police, a sharp reminder of how fugitives exploit Europe's geography, slipping between jurisdictions, blending into expat communities, adopting aliases, and relying on outdated notions that cross-border policing moves slowly. His capture had closed one chapter, but even as his story concluded in Spain, another was already taking shape further east. The network in Norfolk, far from Liverpool's chaos, in the quiet flatlands of Norfolk, another criminal web was forming, one defined by encrypted codes and silent transactions. In early 2020, detectives from Norfolk Police in the Eastern Region Special Operations Unit, or SO, began tracking a suspected drug network moving multi-kilogram shipments of cocaine across eastern England. The group operated with precision, using EncroChat, an encrypted communications platform once thought impenetrable. Among the thousands of handles recovered after European investigators cracked the system, two usernames stood out: Warfire and Tidyfly. Both were traced to a single man, 32-year-old Benjamin McCann from Norfolk. Messages pulled from EncroChat revealed an intricate operation. Cocaine sourced from contacts in the Northwest, cut to stretch profits, then distributed through couriers and stash houses scattered across Norfolk and Suffolk. His tone was calm and businesslike, just codes, weights, and sums. Photos attached to the chats showed tightly wrapped cocaine bricks stamped with unique logos to track their batches. One exchange referenced a 155,000-pound drop in Blowfield, a quiet village outside Norwich. Another detailed delivery schedules with military precision. Investigators cross-referenced the data with surveillance logs, ANPR hits, and devices seized during earlier arrests. Bit by bit, the encrypted usernames began linking to real-world activity. Vehicles spotted at meeting points, burner phones switching locations together, and cash handovers that matched the coded conversations. By mid-2021, the evidence against McCann was strong enough for an arrest warrant, but before police could move in, he was gone. As raids swept through Norfolk, he vanished, leaving behind only digital traces. When the NCA and Crime Stoppers launched a fresh Most Wanted campaign in January 2022, his face appeared on the list, one of several fugitives thought to be hiding somewhere in Spain. On the run, living under false identities, McCann drifted between short-term rentals and low-profile hotels, constantly swapping SIM cards and phone numbers. But unlike many British fugitives who settled comfortably on the Costa del Sol, his trail turned eastward. By late 2021, NCA analysts noticed unusual financial and travel activity, not in Spain, but in Bulgaria. The move was deliberate, a country where his face meant nothing and where the watchful eye of British policing didn't reach as easily. He carried at least 2 passports, one genuine but issued under someone else's name, and another forged with new details. tools that allowed him to move freely across Europe using short flights and land crossings to avoid detection. The forged documents also made it easy to rent rooms and apartments without drawing suspicion, blending in among digital nomads and business travelers. Back in the UK, the NCA's Fugitive Unit, working alongside Interpol and Bulgarian liaison officers, slowly pieced together a profile of his new life. They tracked financial footprints, travel routes, and encrypted communication patterns that echoed his old EncroChat habits. Then in January 2022, his name resurfaced publicly when the NCA and Crime Stoppers relaunched their Most Wanted appeal, urging anyone across Europe to report sightings. Even as his photo appeared in news reports and on social media, McCann stayed one step ahead, shifting countries, swapping phones, and maintaining the quiet invisibility that had protected him for nearly 2 years. But it couldn't last. By mid-2022, a small but crucial signal surfaced. The clue investigators had been waiting for. It was the beginning of an international manhunt that would finally bring his 2-year run to an end. Capture and extradition. In the end, it wasn't a villa on Spain's sunny coast that ended the search. It was a quiet hotel room in Plovdiv, Bulgaria. After nearly 2 years on the run, Benjamin McCann was finally cornered. Acting on shared intelligence between the National Crime Agency, the Spanish Guardia Civil, and the Bulgarian National Police, officers launched a carefully timed operation on the morning of June 13, 2022. Plainclothes Bulgarian officers waited for the go-ahead from the NCA liaison team in Sofia. Then just after dawn, they moved. They walked down the hotel corridor, knocked once, and as the door opened, they already knew who stood before them. Inside, 2 passports lay on the table. McCann offered no resistance. Within minutes, his fingerprints confirmed his identity, and he was swiftly transferred to a high-security detention center in Sofia to prevent any chance of escape. The NCA soon issued a short but powerful statement. Another of Britain's most wanted fugitives had been captured abroad. Extradition proceedings began almost immediately. Within weeks, the Bulgarian courts approved the UK's request, and McCann was escorted under armed guard back to Britain. Later that summer, he landed at Stansted Airport, where Norfolk police took custody. The McCann case became another striking example of how organized crime stretches across borders, and how modern policing adapts to match it. For investigators, it wasn't just a victory, it was proof of evolution. The Norfolk operation highlighted a new era of law enforcement where no case is truly local anymore, and financial disruption is as vital as arrests. Detectives no longer just shut down supply lines. They targeted profits. While no official figures were released, police confirmed that asset confiscation and lifestyle investigations were already underway, tracing the money that fueled the Norfolk network. It was part of a wider message. Hit traffickers where it hurts most, their wallets. Trial and sentencing faced with overwhelming evidence, McCann chose not to fight. In November 2023, at Norwich Crown Court, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply cocaine. Prosecutors described him as a key architect in the Norfolk drug network, a man who coordinated the flow of cocaine across eastern England. For Norfolk Police and the National Crime Agency, the sentencing marked the closure of one of the region's most complex narcotics cases. On November 17, 2023, McCann was sentenced to 10 years in prison. His partners in crime had already faced justice 2 years earlier. Dean Enifer, sentenced to 8 years and 3 months, and Peter McKenna, 7 years and 10 months, following their convictions in August 2021. But even as McCann began his sentence, another investigation was already unfolding in the Northwest, one involving a man whose empire was larger, more violent, and armed to the teeth. The criminal enterprise. By early 2020, detectives from Cheshire Police's Serious and Organized Crime Unit, SOQ, were quietly mapping the movements of a powerful criminal network, one suspected of trafficking cocaine, cannabis, and firearms across northern England. At its center was Dean Garforth, a 31-year-old from Regency Park, Widnes, well known to local intelligence officers as a figure operating high up the chain of supply. Like many others, Garforth's downfall began with EncroChat, the encrypted network once thought unbreakable. Among the seized data, investigators found a handle that kept appearing in high-value deals, Slickcliff. Messages under that alias detailed drug shipments, gun transactions, and coded cash movements. He talked in riddles, half-bricks, bits, tools, language of narcotics and weapons. Between March and July 2020, Slickcliff coordinated massive drug movements across Liverpool, Widnes, and Warrington. Images exchanged through EncroChat showed vacuum-sealed cocaine bricks and hidden firearms tucked inside modified vehicles. When digital forensics confirmed that Slickcliff was Dean Garforth, investigators knew they'd struck gold. The first major break came on May 24, 2020, when a white Ford Transit van failed to stop for police in Bradley, Widnes. After a short pursuit, officers found it abandoned in Norlands Park. Inside, they discovered a mobile phone, later proven to have accessed EncroChat and linked directly to Garforth's network. As the digital trail unfolded, detectives raided his home in October 2020, only to find it recently vacated. Garforth had fled, vanishing into mainland Europe. Eventually, intelligence placed him in Spain, but by then, the evidence was overwhelming. His messages revealed the structure of a sophisticated criminal empire, responsible for supplying tons of narcotics and firearms across multiple counties. What began as a covert intelligence operation had now turned into an international manhunt, one that would span more than 2 years and end in spectacular fashion on the streets of Marbella. ChatGPT said, "On the run in real crime cases." For nearly 2 years, he vanished from sight, living quietly beneath the radar. He drifted through the British expat circles of Marbella and Nueva Andalusia, places where cash dealings and constant movement made it easy to disappear. Detectives from the National Crime Agency and Cheshire's Serious and Organized Crime Unit poured countless hours into tracking him down. Tips surfaced and faded. Unverified sightings near Malaga, whispers of odd jobs, and rumors that he was still tied to drug operations overseas. But every lead ended the same way, cold and silent. Garforth had severed connections, swapped phones, and built a life of shadows. By January 2022, frustration gave way to exposure. The NCA, alongside Crime Stoppers, unveiled a new Most Wanted campaign featuring 12 fugitives believed to be hiding in Spain. Among the faces, Dean Garforth, accused of trafficking drugs and firearms originally from Widnes. Pressure was closing in. His face was now plastered across news outlets and expat communities throughout southern Spain. Still, he stayed hidden. Later, investigators discovered he had been lying low in Nueva Andalusia, a quiet neighborhood just beyond Marbella's tourist belt. He used an e-bike to move around, rarely lingering in one spot, and avoided any vehicle that could be traced. When he stepped out, he blended effortlessly. Sportswear, dark shades, and a cap pulled low over his face. Then came the 24th of October, 2022. After months of surveillance, the net finally tightened. Acting on intelligence from the NCA's liaison officers, plainclothed agents of the Spanish National Police made their move as Garforth cycled down a narrow side street. Realizing the trap had sprung, he tried to push through, colliding with one officer before being forced to the ground and restrained. For the NCA, it was a significant victory. Another fugitive off the list. For Garforth, it marked the end of 2 years on the run. Extradition, prosecution, and sentencing in UK Crime Series. Following his arrest, Garforth was placed in custody by Spanish National Police as extradition proceedings began. The National Crime Agency, working closely with the Home Office Extradition Unit, coordinated the process to bring him back to Britain. A move strongly backed by Cheshire Constabulary, who had been pursuing him since 2020. On 14th March 2023, under heavy escort, Garforth was extradited from Spain to the UK. Upon landing at a secure airfield, he was immediately handed over to Cheshire Police's Serious and Organized Crime Unit. He was charged with conspiracy to supply Class A and B drugs and conspiracy to distribute firearms and ammunition. At Chester Crown Court on the 25th of January 2024, Garforth pleaded guilty to all charges, but the case didn't end with his conviction. Financial investigators launched a proceeds of crime inquiry to trace his illegal earnings. Their findings showed Garforth had profited by around £1.53 million from his operations. While most of that money had vanished, officers managed to locate £40,331 in assets, including half the equity in his witness home and a KTM off-road motorcycle. At a confiscation hearing on 11th February 2025, the court ordered him to repay the full amount or face extra prison time. For Cheshire Police, it was a powerful statement. Justice doesn't end at arrest. It continues until the profits of crime are stripped away. Dean Garforth was sentenced to 19 years and 6 months in prison. What's your take on these cases and the sentences that followed? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your opinion. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next episode of UK Crime Hub.